You're listening to the Coach's Journey podcast, exposing the struggles and celebrating the successes in the life of coaches who are action takers and creating authentic impact in today's world. Whether you're just starting out, expanding your reach, or exploding your impact, you're in the right place right now. Stay tuned and be sure to subscribe to this podcast. Now, here are your hosts of the Coach's Journey podcast.
What's up, Coaches Nation? This is Dr. Sheri and Faisal and San for another amazing episode of the Coach's Journey podcast. So we realized that we really sucked when we were kind of starting out coaching. And I think pretty much most coaches suck when we start out coaching because there's so much that we don't know. And we're wanting to really unpack this idea of like, how good are you really? And how do you know that you're really good? And have you think about where you are in the journey of competency as a coach on your coach's journey? So we know that you're going to find value in this session today because you're in this podcast session today, because we're going to talk about kind of the predictable journey that we go on, and then what you can expect. And then also, how do you level up from sucking to sucking less, to sucking even less, to sucking so little that you actually can have a really good flow of clients and you get to keep them and they don't say no when you want to re-enroll them. So that's the point of today. That's the journey that we're going to go on for today. And in this conversation, there is a really important graphic that I want you guys to see. And if you're watching or listening to this in a podcast, I'm going to walk through it verbally, but you may also want to check this out in the YouTube channel so that you can kind of see the graphic that goes with it. So before we jump into that, Faisal, what do you want to add to that as we start to jump into this topic?
I would say this is probably the most important piece of what we're taught of what we need to do in business. A lot of coaches miss this because they go in with the assumption that they are competent enough to charge at higher rates, but that's not true. And I learned that very early on from my own painful experience that, like, in my mind, I was like, okay, I'm going to charge people this much and I would charge them. But then at the end of the session, the client would not see the value, or they would have a sticker shock in a sense. And I'm like, oh, well, they just can't afford it. But then as I did a little bit more digging in that I became a little bit more humble and got support. I realized, you know what, there were gaps in my own competency that was not allowing the client to make the decision. Now, that doesn't mean that over the years, my conversion rate is 100%, or if that is even possible, or every client signs up with me. But I've realized that working on that skill set piece actually naturally moves the business forward. Even if you don't know that much about business, it gives you the confidence to connect with people better. Now, a lot of coaches might not realize this, but one of the reasons why you're not getting in touch with people subconsciously, because you might not feel competent enough to move them through whatever challenge you have. And unless you tackle this area, you will struggle on the business side a lot.
Yeah, I love that perspective. There was definitely, I would say, the first couple of years where I shifted out of psychology and kind of into the coaching world. I was still trying to figure out, what am I doing? What am I going to offer? What does my program look like? And I really lacked a lot of confidence because I wasn't sure what that looked like. And so because of that whole lack of clarity, I totally did not sell hardcore. I didn't do too many reach outs. I would kind of only have those conversations if they naturally came up. So recognize that this thing that we're talking about today impacts every part of your business, from marketing to sales to the delivery of coaching. All right, so I'm going to share the graphic here. All right, so you should be able to see this. It is a nice triangle, and I don't actually consider it a triangle, except for when you get to the top, you can kind of jump back down. And so I'll talk about that in a minute. But the conceptualization, and this is not my idea, like I did not come up with this, but I think I heard about this over this past week, made perfect sense to me. I was like, oh my gosh, that's the representation of what we go through. So the hierarchy of competence, the first level that we are at is the unconscious incompetence. So basically you suck and you don't really know that you suck, or you don't realize how much you suck. And this isn't just to you, don't take it personal. We all go through this. We've all gone through this. And when I was functioning as a psychologist at a private practice, I was shifting into leadership coaching. And I was using the experience and the information I was learning from books and different things like that. And there was a point at which I was sitting in a session with a business owner. I was sitting across from him. And at that point, I'm so used to working with clients that are like, I have anxiety, I have depression, I've had trauma, I have relationship dysfunction. Like they all come in with these like mental health things. And I was sitting across from him and I'm like, oh, crap. I am thinking this in my brain. Oh, crap. He has no diagnosis. He's successful. He's very hardworking. He has these big goals, big dreams, big visions. I have no idea what to do with him right now. And it was that moment where my unconscious incompetence flipped to the conscious incompetence. I all of a sudden realized I'm at my ceiling of my competence in this situation. So that is when I then shifted. I'm like, I got to get a certification. I got to figure something out. But we all start. So that's kind of one of those moments where I recognized I shifted from this unconscious incompetence where I didn't really know how much I didn't know around coaching and around kind of helping somebody that's a little bit different than my typical clientele. And I shifted into the conscious incompetence where I now realized how much I sucked. And then I was able to more intentionally, expertly seek out what I needed. But in this bottom level, we don't really know. And this is where it's critical to be in a community, to be around other people that know what you're doing, that are higher up in this competency chart than you, so they can look at you and be like, wow, here's an area that you probably don't even understand or realize that you need to grow in, but you need to grow in that way. So it is so important to be around other people on this bottom level and all the levels, but especially the bottom level. Do you have anything to add, Faisal, on that?
Yeah, I love that story that you shared, and it brought back a few uncomfortable memories. So this is why we're sharing this in the hope that it'll help you notice those things in yourself and in your practice. And I can't tell you how many. I think there have been more than, if I were to guess, more than 30, 40, maybe 50 coaching conversations I've been with where I was like, I have no idea what to do. Over the course of 7 years, I have no idea what to do. And actually, one of them happened recently. I'll talk about that in a little bit. But in the beginning, a lot like you, so there were certain people I could help generally. I didn't come from a psychology background, but certain people who were more like me, I would know how to navigate that. But as soon as somebody would go off of my level of experience, also outside of my level of success in life, whether it was in business or relationships or somewhere else, I could see myself going into that anxiety area because I didn't know what to do. And I didn't even know what question to ask, to be honest. And I would somehow navigate it. I would change the subject. I would go in a different, I'd somehow find a way to weasel myself around in those.
Right? Change the subject. I love that. So anyway.
And it wouldn't be it would be, I have clever ways of doing that, but I knew in my own experience that I didn't know how to handle this specific area. And so I remember one of the sessions that I got into, and it was actually a very important session that I was into. And this guy sent me, he fills out the questionnaire. And then on top of that, he sends like a bunch of different charts, like his growth journey. And he talks about, and within that I'm reading, it took me like 40 minutes to go through all that stuff. Like normally I spend like 20 minutes going through them, but double that time. And I'm looking through all this stuff. There are personality tests. There's like all the achievements that he's done. And there are like all sorts of things he had gone through. I hadn't even heard of him. And I'm looking at it, and I'm looking at all the things he's been able to do, all the ways that he's approached, all the help that he's gotten in this area. And he literally, at the end of it, he's like, hey, I'd love to get on the call, but if you don't feel like you can support me in this area, then I'd rather save that time for both of us, because I've been through a lot of coaching and training and all sorts of stuff. I was like, as soon as I saw that he's challenging me before I get on the call, I had to kind of swallow the pill, and I jump on the call. It took about, it was a 90-minute call, and all the way up until 80 minutes, I was just asking questions. I didn't know what the hell I was asking. I was just exploring different areas. I didn't know which area to go into. So I'm like, okay, I'll just pause, I'll breathe, and I'll keep asking. At about, I think 80, 82, 83 minutes, he shares something something that I can grab hold of. But actually, it started being something very positive for him. It was around his relationship. I couldn't even go towards the business side because I didn't know how the hell am I going to navigate that with him. But a lot of that was my own insecurity as well. It wasn't just coaching. Competency part of it is coaching. Competency part of it, insecurity. They kind of go hand in hand. But what I realized after that session, I was like, you know what? There are quite a few people I will not be able to help on this path. So what the hell do I need to do? That's when I'm like, I need to talk to other people who are doing this. So I started connecting with other coaches and like, okay, how do you navigate this area? How do you, and then I started, and more experienced coaches too, is like, how do you navigate this area? And then I joined more masterminds. I started getting coach more. I started studying this stuff more. Like I got on, like my motivation to learn this stuff went way high because my pain was so high at that point. I'm like, what the hell happens if I run into another person like this and I cannot help them? And that client didn't sign up with me. I helped him a little bit at the end, but I know the reason why he didn't sign up. It was because I did not feel competent enough to support that client.
I think that's a beautiful example of a moment of conscious incompetence where you're like, I don't know. And then you get to that moment, and you're like, but then after the whole thing, you're like, yeah, there's a lot for me to continue to grow in, which then that experience helped you realize, well, there's this and there's this and there's this thing I need to grow in. I need to expand. And so then you reached out because you had that conscious, intentional ability to then reach out and be like, I need to learn. I need to, to kind of pull in the resources that I know I'm missing, which is exactly what I think ends up happening during this conscious incompetence is we have the capacity to reach out and make those connections that we need. But before that, we really don't even know what we need. It's like a baby. They just cry. They have no idea if they're hungry, if they're wet, if they're, tired. Like they don't know. They just cry. And so, but there's a point at which they start to recognize what those needs are and what they mean. And then after we've had enough experience and really, competence comes through action and experience. If you've only done a couple things, only been a coach for a really short amount of time, it's just going to take time in the seat of being a coach for you to gain that competence. So then you move up into conscious competence. Let me share my screen again. And conscious competence, which is the third level up, is now where you're getting better at what you do. You're sucking less, a lot less, but you know it, but you still have to kind of think about what you're doing. And so it's kind of like, if you think about riding a bike when you're young, you know that like you don't even know how to pick your feet up off the ground as you're sitting on the bike without tipping over. Like you have no idea what you're going to do. And then you start to do it a little bit and then you start to figure it out, and as an adult now, you just, it doesn't matter what bike it is. You can just jump on and away you go. Like you don't have to think about it. That's approaching the unconscious competence. But there's that phase right before that where you have to think about, okay, how am I moving the handlebars and the steering wheel so that, as I'm leaning even doing speed biking, which I don't do much at all. It's only by accident that I go really fast. But on those moments, I can think of those moments where like I was camping and there was a bike trail and there was this hill and then you have to turn. Like I still have to think about when I'm going really fast down the hill, I still have to think about as I turn, I need to lean because if I don't lean, like I won't turn as well. And so there's still, even in my bike riding, there's still some conscious competence. I still have to think about, okay, Sheri, lean, if there's any motorcyclists out there that are listening to this who, coaches and love to bike, to motorcycle, like there's a learning curve to that as well. So that conscious competence, you're good, but there's still some resources in your brain that have to be used in the moment to kind of plan out where you're going, where you're headed, and that sort of thing. What do you have to add to that, Faisal?
So, yeah, I think we should go through all this stuff. Go ahead, explain. I think I want to come back and kind of bring it to the foundation again, because most coaches that are listening to this, they are starting out and they need to understand, like, how do they deal with the unconscious incompetence and conscious incompetence, and how do we move through that? And what does it look like in their day-to-day practice? And what do they watch out for? So you can understand what that is. So keep going.
Perfect. Okay. So then the final top of the pyramid is especially if you're not watching this and you're listening to this, is the unconscious competence. And that's where, like on a bike, as an adult, just going on a flat surface, like, you know what to do. You don't have to think about it. You can have a conversation. You can talk on the phone and drink a soda at the same time you're riding bike. Don't recommend it, but you can do multiple things because the riding the bike part, you've got it down. You don't even have to think about it. There's an unconscious competence. And that is in coaching, I think that's where you're working with a client, you're in a conversation, and you're able to be this, at least this is my interpretation of how it's applied to me. When I'm in a conversation with a client and I'm able to be fully present, fully listening to what they say, and my brain is not, part of my brain isn't kind of starting to worry about, okay, well, what's the next question? What am I going to do? Where am I going to take them? How am I going to handle this, story that they're sharing me in the context of what we've already been doing? If I'm having those, like that literal conversation in my brain, which sometimes I still do, depending on the circumstances, that's still conscious competence. But when I don't have to have that, or the moments that, and I'm just kind of going with it, that's where I feel like for me is the unconscious competence, to where I've done it enough, I've developed a gut around it. Like I just kind of know what works and I don't have to really think about it. But here's the fun part, why I don't think this is necessarily just a pyramid, is because if you're like me as an entrepreneur, when you develop that unconscious competence, you kind of get bored and you want to, you want to take yourself to the next level. Well, what do you do when you take yourself to the next level if you're already at the top and you're at that unconscious competence? Well, then you're like, hey, I have developed unconscious competence with one-on-one coaching. So now I'm going to get another certification in doing something different. Or now I'm going to start group coaching or doing a mastermind, something I've never done before, which then I think kicks you down to maybe the unconscious incompetence. But probably if you're still in the coaching realm, it's probably more the conscious incompetence, because you know enough about the picture of coaching that you probably know enough to know where you don't know things. But I think we have this cycle of going from the top and being like, yeah, now I need to challenge myself again. And then we go back down. So it's an interesting cycle. It's an interesting journey, but I think it's really an important one to be aware of, because if we don't understand that this feeling of like, I suck and I don't even know how I suck, or I suck, but I do know where I suck, but I still suck. It's easy for us to internalize that and to start to say, yeah, I told you I shouldn't have gone to coaching. I shouldn't have quit my job. I'm not cut out for this. I should never have. These are things where our brains can go when we internalize the suck. But the reality is the suck is there just because it's part of the journey, has not necessarily to do with you. Like you can grow yourself out of the suck. All right. So I'll pass that on to, what do you want to expound on?
Trying to see how many times you said suck.
Suck.
Okay, so let's and I love that cycle or pyramid, however we want to look at it, but I want to bring it down, grounded to what's actually happening in our experience. I shared a video this week too about this a little bit, is that most coaches I've talked to, they've gone through an experience, possibly a challenging experience, a growth experience in their own life, where they got to this point, okay, I dealt with this thing, and now there's a combination of they like working with other people. So they're like, oh, can I do this with other people? So they're using their experience and some things that they've learned, whether through books or other areas, and they want to bring it into the coaching world. And it can generally work. There are coaches I've seen who have been able to do that without much training and to a certain degree. But we're talking about a professional. We're talking about being a professional. Being a professional is a little bit different than just doing it to help people. And interestingly, most coaches have that in their language. So I just want to help people. Okay, great. You can help people in all sorts of ways. You can help your family members. You can give people perspective. You can give people guidance. You can even walk people through a general sort of parts of a coaching session. But that is very different than charging people for a professional service. Because in that context, you're exchanging value for money. Mm-hmm. The value needs to be high enough for the client to part ways with money. And that is actually not easy to do. And that requires, first of all, to understand sales to begin with, but even if you take away the sales process, even if you take it away, if there is not enough value, what you will often hear is, I can't afford this. Oh, that's too much. Or I don't think I don't think I can do this on my own at this point. Like there are these kind of statements you hear, and you might think that, okay, that's actually real. It's not real. They don't feel the value enough yet. So they're communicating it in that way. Now, if you don't know to look out for those signs, and I'm saying this because I listen to calls from different coaches that they will, in my own calls, when somebody says that this is a little bit too much, or this is outside of my budget, or I can't afford it, all I have to do is just look at their face in body language, and I know that it's not related to that. And I just experienced it a month ago. I did a session with somebody, strategy session, and I got to the end of it because I've done this enough time. I'm like, I don't think it has landed enough. And I still offered the program and everything. He's like, you know what? I'm in a space, and he was in a difficult situation. That doesn't mean people don't have financial challenges. He was, but I felt like, you know what? It didn't land enough. So what I did was, and this wasn't, maybe this is a tip for you. So what I did was I told him like, okay, you know, I offer this one-on-one bonus, and he was going to sign up for the group program, but I wanted to test this out. I'm like, I offer this bonus as part of my group program, but I'd be willing to give you one more bonus session, and just because he had a few things to work on until then. So I gave him some homework. We'll meet again in about 3 weeks. I know you financially, you're not in that space. I played along with what he said. And then I met with him. I actually met with him yesterday. And then I did another strategy session. I went in areas that I did not go. And a lot of it was because I stuck too much on the personal side last time. I went towards the business. As soon as I go there, by the end of the session, this is what I said. And this was very interesting because I was testing this out. I told him like, you know what? I don't think you're in a space to invest right now. And this is going to be a time commitment, and there's going to be a lot of stuff. So maybe you should take a pause right now. And I knew that it landed enough because it went in, and I don't want to go into the details, but we'll kind of revisit this in a couple of months, and we'll see if you want to sign up for the program. As soon as I finished that, he's like, hey, I think I want to move ahead.
Reverse psychology.
There was a little bit of a sales tactic there, but even before that, I knew that it landed. But I needed to push him a little bit more. And it's not to manipulate people. It's one of our job as coaches is to help people make decisions, because actually making decisions is very hard for people. And part of the sales process or coaching is that you're helping them make decisions that serve them. I know that this program will serve him. But the reason why I did this, because I knew that it didn't work. Before he even opened his mouth to say that he's not going to buy it. So I gave him another opportunity to experience that and did that. Now, you don't have to do that, but I knew enough to do that. Now, there was a past where if I were to go back to it, I would finish a strategy session. I would have no idea why this person didn't sign up. And this is where a lot of coaches land, where you're in that unconscious incompetence area.
Yeah.
Because you're not looking at it from a professional surface point of view. You're looking at it from a heart space. You're looking at supporting people, but there is a different component. People have to part ways with their hard-earned money. It doesn't matter how rich they are. You actually have found that the richer people are, the harder for them to part way with money. It was a very interesting experience because they actually think about their money. They don't react. They actually want to see value around it. People who don't have money, they react fast.
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts about this?
Yeah, I think that's fascinating. Yeah, I was just kind of thinking about a lot of the marketing strategies. And I like that you specified, in no way should we be manipulative, sneaky, slimy, or anything. But I love that you frame sales is simply an opportunity to coach somebody to make a decision, because I think you're right. A lot of times people get paralyzed by the analysis paralysis. They get paralyzed by indecision. And with thinking about the hierarchy of competency, it's easy to think about this competency as a coach. And maybe those that are listening, you've been coaching for a while, or maybe you're like me, where you were doing this in kind of another context for quite some time. But that's not the only thing to gain competency in as a coach. What about your marketing? How are you putting yourself across to other people? Is it on social media? Are you doing in-person things? That there's a competency to that, where you're like, I don't know why nobody's buying. So that is unconscious incompetence. You don't know. But then when you start to understand like, oh, like these are the things around marketing and around doing a sales call or doing a masterclass or a webinar or doing all these, a challenge to lead to a sales, like so many different ways to kind of draw people in. But if you're going to get to a point where you start to recognize like, okay, I know what the ideal structure is, and now these are the areas that I'm not doing well in. So then you can kind of get that specific help. So just want to remind y'all that sales and marketing, there is also a hierarchy of competency for you in those areas as well, in addition to your actual coaching skills.
Yeah, and this is why this is actually very complex. There are so many variables that there's a very steep learning curve in here. And that's why a lot of coaches might feel overwhelmed and overthinking about a lot of things. But I mean, today I got a message from one of our community members and I'm like, that's normal. He doesn't know that that's normal, but I know that's normal because I've gone through so many. In fact, I'm going through that right now because I'm uncomfortable with some of the things that I'm doing, but I know how to handle it a little bit better because I've gone through it about 1 billion times by now. It's like, okay, it's the same. I'm going to deal with it. I need to deal with that. So, and I want to highlight this. So what do you need to pay attention to? There are specific areas you can pay attention to here. And the only way for you to know where your competence and incompetence is for you to put yourself out there. There's no other way to know. Like you can conceptually think that, oh, well, you've studied 100 books or 500 books, or you've taken this certification, that certification. It doesn't matter. I've seen coaches who've gone through 10 different certifications, but they have no business. Yeah. And because they haven't actually put themselves out there and they haven't tested it, so they don't know beyond a shadow of a doubt. That's the only way we know things is when we experiment with things. And part of that experimentation is you put yourself out there. So my challenge to you, and I gave that same challenge on Monday, is talk to 100 people. Go book short calls with 100 people where you invite them to a strategy session or a coaching conversation that's at a minimum, I would say, an hour. It could be 90 minutes, 2 hours, where you take them through the coaching process for yourself. You don't need to learn it, because as soon as I said that, somebody might be like, well, I need to learn this. I need to do it. No, don't do anything. Talk to 100 people and have those and invite a bunch of people. And out of all the people that you talk to, maybe about 30 of them will say yes to a strategy session. You will find a way when you have this goal. We can talk about the specifics of that. So 30 people you did that strategy session with. First of all, when you jump into these calls, you will understand where you get stuck in. You will know beyond a shadow of a doubt, somebody shares something you don't know how to navigate. You don't know which stories. And they might share a challenging experience about their relationship, and you're like, oh, okay, I can solve this. Okay, so you jump in there and then you spend about 2 hours talking about that thing and nothing happened. It doesn't go anywhere. And you're thinking that you can solve that. Or they're bringing up a business problem. You think that that's the actual problem I need to go towards. You spend a lot of time, nothing happened. You're not even talking about any offer because you don't even know what happened in there. So these calls will help you understand, okay, where are your gaps? So now you're going from unconscious incompetence to conscious incompetence. You're one level up already as you're trying this. Yeah. And now, okay, these are my gaps. What are other coaches doing? Then we can work through that data. It's like, what's happening? And I would bet this, if you did 30 calls, I would bet that you're going to get 1 or 2 clients out of it, because you will find 1 or 2 people that you will be able to competently help in some way. Yeah. And that's the only way to know that. And you might be thinking, well, I don't know who to reach out to. I don't know. Go through your network. Go through everybody you know on Facebook, everybody you know on LinkedIn, connect with them, find out who wants to go through that free strategy session. Yeah. If you message 600 people, you will get about 30 people.
Yeah. And you can, don't just say, hey, do you want to, but also, do you know anybody? And sometimes I've done that where I reach out to somebody that I think might be my ideal client, but I'm like, hey, this is what I'm doing. This is what I'm trying. This is a new program I'm doing. And I'm reaching out to people to find out, to do a little market research, to make sure that I can create the program that's going to meet their needs. Do you know anybody who fits this criteria? And then sometimes they're like, actually, I do, so you can ask people, if they know anybody, and maybe they'll even raise their hand too.
Yeah. And so that's my challenge to you. Do that over the course of next month. I'm not even giving you a week. Next month, have those strategy sessions, figure out where you're stuck in. And if your mind is coming up with these thoughts around, oh, well, I don't know how to find people, that's your incompetency showing up in terms of those thoughts. I would take that as a sign that, oh, you know what, I'm not confident enough to reach out to you. Because if you were, you wouldn't get stuck with the how. This is something Steve Chandler talks about a lot, is that whenever people get stuck in how, and you will find that in your clients, it's not the how that's the problem. How is always the simpler part. The problem is the what and the why, and looking at that a certain way. It's your perception that's an issue. It's your mindset that's an issue. As soon as you deal with that, you find a way how to approach it. And the rest is just work. You're just doing work. That's just consistency and work. So my challenge to you is do that. And I want to also hear from you guys. Where have you noticed? How do you know that you're good at coaching without having to put that out? And if you have put it out, if you've had maybe 10 calls, 20 calls, a strategy session, you've had your coaching, share with us where are the areas you've gone stuck in so we can support you in. Put that in the chat. I'd be happy to kind of look at that and send a video, or we can book a short conversation. We can talk to you. If you're listening to this on the podcast or YouTube, you can send comments. You can also reach out to us, support@coachingmasterycommunity.com. We can book a short call, or definitely join our Facebook group where you can interact with us a lot as well. But this is an area to pay attention to, because if you cannot figure out the competency piece, if you don't put yourself out there, there's no way for you to figure this out. And by the way, having a coaching buddy, that is not enough.
Yeah.
Another coach in your certification, or somebody that you know that you're coaching, that's too safe of a place to be in. It's good for feedback, but you need to talk to people who you have not talked to and that you're going to help. That is a very different space, and you need to ask for them to invest their money. That's the only way you know that your product or service is valued.
Yeah, getting feedback from people's wallet. Critically important. All right, I love this topic. I hope you guys are getting encouraged by it. You know, the logical piece is, here's the hierarchy, here's what you can expect. But the emotional piece of it is exactly what Faisal said. You are a coach. And so the irony is sometimes we get stuck in our own head and we don't reach out to get the support to change our own mindset. So if we are going to serve other people and helping them change their perspectives, their mindsets, we need to be open and reaching out and continually examining our own so that we're not getting stuck ourselves. So we have to help ourselves, and we can then better help other people. So you guys know where you can reach us. You can comment, or, depending on the platform that you're hearing this, or you can send us an email. We would love to support you. If you're interested, if you already know, if you're like at that, either at the unconscious competency or unconscious incompetency, oh my gosh, say all these words, or the conscious incompetency, especially those two, a community where it gives you feedback and has all sorts of robust solutions to help you level up. Like that is like the ideal solution, the one-stop shop to be able to do all of that stuff. And that's what the Coaching Mastery community is. We are a one-stop shop to be able to be around peers and leaders, to be able to level up and to be able to ask questions, get feedback. It's very interactive and a very high personal touch at an extremely ridiculously low price. Anyway, so if that is interesting to you, reach out to us. We'll absolutely have a conversation to see if it is a good fit for you. But maybe, like Faisal said, we'll say, this isn't the right thing for you. Maybe we'll revisit this in 3 months.
You can't tell them that and then tell them.
No, seriously though, sometimes this isn't the right fit for people, but a lot of times it is. So if you're curious, reach out. We'll have that conversation. All right. Any parting words of wisdom?
I just wanted to share, because we were talking a lot about them. Like there are areas, even within my coaching, there are areas where I feel like I'm unconsciously competent, but there are areas where I'm struggling in. I know that. And I didn't get a chance to share a couple of the stories around that. I'll probably do a video, because I literally lost a 12K client recently. And I know that there was something, I didn't know what I didn't know. I didn't know where I messed up. So now I'm trying to explore different ways, bringing it up to other coaches to find out like what is happening there, because I don't know what the hell happened. Parts of it and all parts of it I didn't. I'm speaking at an event. I'm going to be doing a live coaching session in front of 700 people in a very short amount of time. I'm somewhat competent, but I think I'm going to test it out and see. I don't feel comfortable. There are a lot of areas that are incredibly uncomfortable with. Even some of the clients that I've just recently gotten, their goals are really big. I'm like, I have these doubts. I'm like, okay, can I help them? But I'm jumping in. And this is the whole name of the game, is that you don't need to have all the competence, but you need to jump in and build it as you move forward. You see where your gaps are as you're moving forward. But if you don't see, you're not going to do anything.
You have to jump into the pool in order to learn how to swim.
Yeah.
You just do. Thank you guys for watching and listening. I hope you got a ton of value out of this. I hope it helped you think about your own journey as a coach a little bit differently and a little bit more compassionately towards yourself, but also a little bit more seriously about, okay, if I'm going to be a professional coach and not treat this like a hobby or something like that, like I need to get real and serious about this because that's what's going to make you amazing. We'll see you next time. Bye.
You're listening to the Coach's Journey podcast.